ICANN Academy is a not-for-profit organization, and we support education in some of the most challenging regions across the continent. So today we are all the way in Malawi, and I really want to find out more about some of the rural communities or underserved communities, because this is where the challenge is what actually inspired your commitment, especially in relation to women and youth empowerment.
So I'm the Women and Youth Empowerment Manager for an organization called Care International in Malawi. It's all about my childhood. So seeing young people, hardworking women being held back due to different challenges they are facing, that also influenced my desire. So today, my leadership is driven by the conviction that empowering women and youth doesn't just change individual lives, but it shifts the entire community towards dignity, resilience, as well as the possibilities.
But what are the most pressing challenges facing women and young people, young women in particular, in Malawi today?
There are a number of challenges which I would like to share with you, which as a country we are experiencing, especially focusing on women and the youth.
We haven't actually spoken to the people that truly matters. Welcome to Education Rising, African Voices of the Future. Welcome back to our show. And my name is Diana Powell, and I'm the founder of ICANN Academy Group. And as usual, we have some amazing people on our show, and one in particular, all the way from Malawi. And this gentleman, I remember seeing the work online on LinkedIn, and I just said to myself that we definitely have to have this amazing man on our show today. And just to give you just a little bit of background about what we do, ICANN Academy is a not-for-profit organization, and we support education in some of the most challenging regions across the continent. And, it's something that we are very, very passionate about, because some of you are reading a lot of stories about what's going on the continent in terms of education. But we want to highlight some of the challenges, but we also want to highlight some of the fantastic work that's also taking place. So today we are all the way in Malawi, and I want to introduce our guest, Chikonzero Undi. I'm not going to introduce you initially. I just want you just give me a little bit of background on you, and then we will jump straight into the interview.
Yes, thank you so much, Diana. I like the way you pronounced my name. So okay. All right. Yes, so as you have already said, I'm Chikonzero Undi. I'm based in Malawi. I work in the field of women and youth. So I'm the Women and Youth Empowerment Manager for an organization called Care International in Malawi. And basically my work revolves around women and youth empowerment.
Okay.
I can say so in brief. Yes.
So with Care, is Care an international organization, and they have a location in Malawi? Tell me a little bit more about the organization.
Yes, exactly. So Care is Care International, and we have a number of country offices, but we are also working in Malawi. So that's why we are saying Care International in Malawi, but we also have other country offices in various countries here in Africa and outside Africa. But most of our development work, as well as humanitarian work, is happening here in Africa. But countries like in Europe, Australia, as well as America, they just support us through the fundraising process. But here in Africa, it's where we are doing the development work as well as humanitarian work. So myself, I'm based here in Malawi. In fact, I'm also Malawian. So I'm Malawian, supporting my country people here in Malawi. Yes.
Fantastic. So one of the first questions I want to ask you is what actually inspired, your commitment, especially in relation to women and youth empowerment, and how does that purpose, evolved? How did it evolve around the work that you do in Care?
Thank you. That's a good one. So it's all about my childhood. I'll say my childhood. So basically, my commitment to work with women and the youth in this sector of women and youth empowerment began when I was growing up. So seeing young people, hardworking women being held back due to different challenges they are facing, that also influenced my desire to work in this sector. So that reality seeing that woman is struggling, that young man is struggling in school, that reality stayed with me. So when I joined the Care Malawi, that purpose deepened now. So working closely with communities, I saw first-hand information, first experiences to see how people are suffering and myself to contribute in the coming up with the solutions, helping the women and youth to come up with their own solutions. So over time, my purpose evolved from simply wanting to support women and youth, but now to believing that they must be at the center of how we design, lead, and measure the development. So today, my leadership is driven by the conviction that empowering women and youth doesn't just change individual lives, but it shifts the entire community towards dignity, resilience, as well as the possibilities.
And I love what you said around the idea that the work is focused on the immediate needs, on the voices of the communities, and not just a case of this is what we're going to do without being, consulting those who actually matter. And I think that is something that is so important because sometimes as NGOs, sometimes we get it wrong.
Exactly.
And we haven't actually spoken to the people that truly matters.
Exactly. In fact, that is one of the valid points. So we call that evidence-based programming, whereby we need to have evidence and we need to engage and we need to involve the people themselves. The women and the youth, they need to find solutions to their own problems, not us finding solutions for their own problems, because they understand better their own challenges. And they can also innovate and bring out solutions to their own problems, not somebody outside their community or outside their country to come and tell them that this is the solution to your problem.
Yes, yes. So you touched on, you touched on challenges. So I want to kind of expand a little bit more on the reality on the ground. And, you've mentioned, I think I mentioned about education, some of the challenges of women and young girls. But what are the most pressing challenges facing women and young people, young women in particular in Malawi today? And I really want to find out more about some of the rural communities or underserved communities, because this is where the challenge is.
Yes, so that's a good one. So, in Malawi, like my work, as I've already said, we really work in the communities, not the urban areas. So basically, in the rural communities, it's where most of those challenges are existing. There are a number of challenges which I would like to share with you, which as a country we are experiencing, especially focusing on women and the youth. The first one is about education barriers, as well as the high dropout rates, especially for girls. So here in Malawi, girls experience lower secondary, even primary school completion rates, especially at secondary level. You find that enrollment rates at primary school are high for girls compared to boys. But when they transit to secondary school, you find out that the completion rate reduces now for girls. For example, I think it used to be around 7.6% completion rate for girls against the 71, around 71, if not 70% for boys. And the drivers for those low completion rate for girls are things like early and forced marriages, which are usually linked to our culture, as well as issues dealing with the long travel distances to school. So the girls find it hard to walk to school, which are long distances. And basically poverty as well at the household. And you see that most households promote boys to go to school compared to girls, because they say, okay, a girl will get married to a man and she will be taken care by a husband, while this boy, he needs to be educated so that he can provide for his family. So that is the first challenge. But the second challenge linked to that is, as well as I've already said, about early marriages, as well as adolescent pregnancies and the sexual reproductive health related challenges. In the rural areas in our country, Malawi, we are facing a lot of issues, limited access to reproductive health services, even issues of menstrual hygiene. They sound small, but for a girl during school periods, if she finds it hard to attend classes, especially due to lack of menstrual hygiene facilities in the schools. And we also talk about the high rates of adolescent girls, a high rate of pregnancies among adolescent girls. And there's this issue of cultural stigma that prevents girls from seeking other reproductive health services. And another challenge which I would like to add on that is gender-based violence, as well as harmful cultural practices. Here in Malawi, issues of gender-based violence remains widespread. This is fueled by issues of poverty. So we experience a lot of domestic violence, sexual violence, and we have the discriminatory norms amongst the different households. Of course, I understand the government is trying its best to work, coming with the good policies, but still more, we face those challenges. Let me add another challenge, which is mostly targeting the youth. There's also the social exclusion of youth in decision making. You know, our country, we have more than 60% of our population are young people. Despite Malawi having a youthful population, you find that in most decision-making positions across various sectors, there are only very few young people who are in decision-making. So young people are usually followers and they just listen from others. So that is one also of the challenges. I think I can stop there, but there are many challenges, gender inequalities, limited agency, just to add. But those are the key challenges which I've just shared.
So I just want to touch on then your role and how you interact with the communities. Because you mentioned that it's about understanding the needs, the challenges, and having those communities in it's central to that conversation. Sorry. Is your work then about creating awareness? Is it about prevention? How does your work interlink with regards to some of the challenges that you've just said? And give me some examples, please, of the fantastic work you're doing on the ground.
Okay, so as the Care International in Malawi, we have various interventions. We have various projects. So as I've already shared a number of challenges, some are related to education, some are related to health, some are related to governance, some are related to livelihoods, some even are related to humanitarian context, because Malawi is also experiencing a lot of humanitarian challenges, disasters. So as an institution, we have various thematic areas like what I've just mentioned. So my role, we call it a cross-cutting role, whereby despite having thematic leads in education, in health, in livelihoods, in agriculture, my role is to make sure that if we are doing an education project, which is trying to reduce the school dropout, I should make sure that we have specific interventions that are targeting those vulnerable populations, the women and the youth. So we can have a program, which, as we said in the introductory part of our discussion, which somebody can bring an idea to say, this is the theory of change. Those are the interventions we are going to bring. So my role is to make sure to say, no, pause. Let us go back in the community. Let us talk to the women themselves. Let us talk to the young people themselves. They should tell us the real challenges they are experiencing. So when we go to the communities and hear from those women and the young people, that information we get, it's what we use to inform our programs. So my role is to make sure that we hear the voices of the youth, the voices of the women, and we bring that voice into our projects as in our activity interventions. So it's like I make sure that the women and the youth themselves are a part and parcel of the designing process of our programming. And after designing, I make sure that the women and the girls themselves, as well as youth, are a part of the implementation process. They are part of the monitoring process. If we are budgeting, I make sure that our budget is also including those aspects. Because if we miss that, we'll say we have a healthy project targeting women and youth, yet we are not targeting the real the desired populations. So my role is to make sure that the voices of women and youth are ahead and are included, and they are leading, not following.
We usually hear this term empowerment. And sometimes I just feel sometimes this word is thrown around quite a bit. And I think sometimes we need to have a clear understanding as to exactly what this word means. So, in your view, what is the difference between simply involving women, girls, young people, and what does it truly mean when we talk about empowering them? What does and I don't want to have a philosophical sort of breakdown. What does it actually mean? What does it actually mean, empowerment or empowering?
Exactly. In fact, that's a good question. And I will build on what I just shared with you in the area question I think you just asked. People confuse empowerment and the participation. And if you check in most of the projects which NGOs are implementing, I'm telling you, women and youth are mostly just participating, not necessarily that they are empowered. Because to me, when somebody talk about participation, for me, I look at participation as being just present. So participation is just being present. While if we talk about empowerment, for me, I believe empowerment is about having influence, control, and voice. Those three key issues. While when we are talking about participation, we are just being present, meaning that women, youth are just taking part in program activities. So we are constructing a clinic, women and the youth can just come and participate in that construction. They were not even consulted, whereby they could make a decision to say, okay, this clinic should have this wing, which will take responsibility or will take the needs about our needs, but they will just take part in the program, attending the meeting, answering the questions. We go there with a survey, they answer the questions, and we come here and say, women and youth, they participated. That is not empowerment. While when we are talking about empowerment, as I said, we are talking about having influence, control, and voice. So empowerment goes beyond involvement. It means women and youth have the agency, whereby they can take meaningful choices about their lives, livelihoods, as well as the future. Then we can also talk about women and youth are able to shape decisions, not just attend meetings, but their priorities influence program design. So they should influence the program design. They can influence the budget to say, oh, so there's this issue about you guys. Let us have resources to take care of this issue. We talk about the issue of governance and accountability structures. And they have access and control over resources, such as land. We are talking about skills. We are talking about income, leadership positions, and information. They need to have the access as well as control, because sometimes you can have access to information as well as the income, but you don't have control over it. Then it means you are not empowered, but you should also have that control. And an empowered woman and the youth, we are talking about someone who is able to challenge and transform power dynamics, especially here in Africa. We are more rooted into cultural things. So when we are talking about empowerment, a young woman or a woman, a youth should be able to challenge and transform power dynamics after being given the skills and as well as the knowledge. So he or she should be able to address underlying inequalities. We are talking about the gender norms, the social norms, the gender laws, economic barriers. And that woman, as well as that youth, should gain confidence and the capacity even to speak without fear, to negotiate as well as to claim his or her rights. So true empowerment to me is about shifting power, opportunities, as well as voice. Not just about fulfilling the seats, just to say we have 20 boys, or we have 20 girls, or we have 60 women, yet they don't have any influence in that meeting. We can have a meeting dominated by youth and women who don't have their voice. But when writing a report, we just say out of 300 people, we had 200 youth and we had maybe 250 women. And somebody, if he or she looks at that report, he said, oh, so you are really engaging youth and women, but they were just fulfilling the seats. So that's the difference between empowerment and participation. So in our programming, we are thriving to make sure that the women and youth are fully empowered so that when they participate, they can influence the change themselves.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Over the last couple of years, well, actually, it's been longer than this. There's always this conversation around funding and how some of these prevention projects, these initiatives are being funded. I've been working with NGOs for a number of years, and it always comes down to, you touched on it, budgets. How are these projects going to be funded? Too many times it's run by volunteers and they're doing some fantastic work, but it's not being funded. But what has happened over the last few years in terms of US aid? And there's whole conversations around sustainability now. And I want to understand now about how NGOs such as yourself can move beyond, say, short-term intervention. Because you talk about data, you talk about statistics, what happens to this? But we are moving now into a totally different era now. And one of the things that ICANN Academy Group is advocating is about sustainability. So, so when we're talking about sustainability now, how can we look at these short-term interventions and how can we include sustainable systems that can really uplift those communities that you serve? Sorry, Chikonzero, you're mute.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't know that I'm muted. Okay, so in fact, with the current landscape, issues of sustainability are very critical. And like I'll talk about our organization, especially on how do we create sustainable systems change. So I'll talk about sustainability because it's one of the key pillars to make sure that even the survival of the organization. So the first thing I want to talk is the sustainable empowerment, which requires a shift in power, resources, as well as structures, not just the project activities. So to me, when we talk about sustainability, true system change happens when a number of things have happened. The first one, I will talk about the strengthening the social protection systems, not just isolating projects. So for actors in this sector, like ourselves, like the NGOs, I think we really need now to align our programs and projects to complement national systems, not just about replacing them. Because like here in Malawi, as the government, it has already active systems, policies, like the legal framework. It's already there. But our role is to align our work to complement those systems, not about to replace them. While like for governments, their role is to strengthen those existing social protection frameworks. And another point is to address structural gender inequalities, not just the symptoms, because those have also a great impact on the issues of sustainability. So we talk about short-term interventions, which are often focused on the training of women and youth. But the training cannot fix the systematic discrimination because we have that systematic discrimination. For example, here in Malawi, I can tell you that despite all those things I have shared, like we have a female-dominated population, you realize that women only occupy about 1/3, which is about 30% of paid employment. And they face major leadership and representation gaps in most decision-making positions. So we need to come up with the sustainable solutions. For example, we need to invest in gender responsive laws, enforcement mechanisms, as well as community norm change initiatives, which will address those gender gaps. And the secondary, we also need to shift youth engagement from token participation to shared power. Because currently you see that young people in Malawi face a lot of challenges. For example, unemployment, and as well as less participation in key decision-making positions. So we really need systematic level changes. We need to institutionalize youth quotas in local councils Because when we have more young people in those decision-making positions, our interventions will also be more sustainable. And we also need to strengthen the local ownership and the community-led governance. You know, projects ends. Like here, we are talking about care. We can't be here forever. Project has a lifespan. We start this year, maybe it's a 2-year project. After 2 years, we are going. So project end, but the systems survive. So if we have well-structured and good systems, those systems will always be there even when the care is gone. So we really need to have good and real system change, which will embed the community accountability mechanisms into government structures, which shift NGO roles from implementers to facilitators. We shouldn't implement. We should leave the community youth, the women, to be in forefront of implementing, because when we go, they'll continue with those activities. And another important point, we should also ensure multi-sector collaboration instead of working in silos. So governments, NGOs like CARE, as well as community, we must work from shared national plan. We should have one common plan. Like here in Malawi, we have what we call the Malawi 2063. So everyone who is implementing, any NGO which is implementing here, it's working towards the 2063 plan. So we really need to have harmonized monitoring frameworks, integrate youth, gender, climate change issues into across all the sectors. So with such things, we'll have sustainable interventions. And even when NGOs go, the young people and the women will continue implementing the activities without any problem.
Just want to say thank you for that. I just want to just let everyone know that this is African Rising, African Voices for the Future, and we are talking to Chikonzero Undi from Care International in Malawi. And so I'm going to lead on to another question. You kind of touched on this in relation to young people and empowerment. You explained the practicalities of empowering. You spoke about the Malawi government agenda 2063. Okay.
Yes.
Now, one of the big things that we love to have a conversation around is, what does the future of the continent look like? You know, data is saying that in, I think, is it 2050, that the continent is going to be one of the youngest continents in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Continent has a very, very young population. You've actually expressed that as well in Malawi. So we're looking at now how whatever we invest in now is going to be the root or the seed that's going to germinate to support the system, these young people, as young adults, as future leaders. So now, thinking about the work that you're doing and some of the challenges, NGOs are enablers in a short sense, but you mentioned about the systems, because projects are just projects, they're short-term initiatives, you move on, you leave systems behind. But how do we now then, looking at empowerment, looking at leadership, how do we shift the narrative of seeing young people more so than just beneficiaries of development to more co-creators? I know you touched on this with regards to some of the community development. I want to look at specifically young people now. Yes. Young people across the world, across the continent, young people as young people, and there's a lot of challenges, but I'm looking at future leaders here now. How do we shift this narrative?
Yes, I like that. We have those young people. They are people with a lot of ideas, and they also have a lot of energy. So moving forward, for me, there are a number of points I would like to propose or to put forward. The first one is we really need to move from consultation to co-creation, because currently most institutions, be it NGO or private sector, they just consult young people. They don't want to co-create. So the only way of doing things is that youth are invited to give input after decisions have already been made. While the way we really need to be doing things is youth are supposed to be involved from the very start in the point where we are defining the problem. We needed to co-design solutions with the young people, setting priorities together and evaluate the results. So here, what we mean is that youth should be sitting on the project design teams. I already said that, I think, in a certain question before. Youth must be sitting in the project design team, not just going there to do focus group discussions. We put women or youth together, then we go. But they should lead in the innovation challenges, community market mapping, in the research, even in the solution prototyping. Youth should be there. Youth should become co-authors of programs, not just the recipients of the programs. And secondly, we really need to shift resources directly to youth-led structures. Like here in Malawi, we have very good structures. The government has what we call the National Youth Council. It regulates the youth groups, the youth clubs. So we really need to shift resources. Instead of focusing on just organizations like CARE, it's now time we also start, even big organizations, even the UN organizations, they should now start sub-granting some of the resources to the youth-led structures, which are in the communities, so that they can co-create, they can implement, they can design their own projects and implement. They make some mistakes, but they learn from those mistakes and improve. So we really need to empower them. We can fund youth-led community-based organizations directly. And the third one I would like also to add is to replace tokenism with a shared decision making. Maybe someone can ask, tokenism, what are you talking about? So when we are talking about tokenism, usually in our youth programming, we are talking about one young person on a panel, and that one will say, okay, we had youth on the panel because we brought one young person at the panel, just to tick the box or just to please them. Youth invited to the ceremonies, not a strategy meeting. We had all those meetings to plan. But at the end, now we have the ceremony. It's when now we are bringing the youth. Instead of bringing them in that whole process, we have what we call youth ambassadors. But those ambassadors, they also don't have the decision-making power. That's just tokenism. But when we are talking about true leadership, we have what we call like youth quotas. Like here, we have what we call councils, the local councils in Malawi. We have a quota where we say it's a must. Young people must be there. We have what we call youth signatures or approvals in the budgeting. Youth should also be able to approve, to say, okay, let us approve. Let us give them those powers. And lastly, maybe on the same point, we really need to build that enabling environment. Because you can build the skill, you can train the young people. Like here in Malawi, we have a lot of schools which are training young people, very bright young people. They graduate from colleges as well as universities. But when they get out, if we haven't created that enabling environment, those skills will be just useless because they don't have a platform to apply those skills. So we really need to do a number of things like reforming the policies that limit youth access to land. For example, here we have land issues. We have to come up with financing. A youth has been trained in activity-related trade, but it doesn't have resources. So we should also look into the issue of financing. We should create that good legal framework that supports young people. With that, we will now see that we will have youth as partners, not just as participants. We'll have an empowered young person. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I want to touch on something that you mentioned quite earlier on in our conversation today. And it's around some of the stigmas around cultures and traditions and how it can probably, can't choose my words here, at times, not all the time, can sometimes hinder progress in terms of women and young girls and how they are empowered. Yeah. And so there's, of course, there's two sides to this because, you know, we need culture. Culture gives us grounding, tradition gives us grounding. But there are some that perhaps some could say that perhaps is not so empowering. I'll put it that way. All right. Mm-hmm. So how do you navigate cultural traditions that may limit on the ones that limit young girls and women in participating within their communities?
Okay, so like I like it, you said it. You know,
I have to tread carefully here. I have to tread carefully.
Yes, yes. In fact, I like the way you have presented it. You know, we cannot throw away culture. Culture defines us.
Mm.
And we are here because of culture. If you say this is a Malawian, it means it has a Malawian culture. And here in Malawi, we also have different cultural backgrounds. That defines us. And that makes us. Culture is good. We just need to see how best we can treat it. So the first thing, which like here when we are doing our programming, because we understand that there are a lot of various cultural related barriers that limit women as well as youth participation or empowerment. So the first thing we do is to engage the traditional and the religious readers, because like here in Malawi and in most places in Africa, we are deeply rooted into tradition as well as religion. So the first thing is to engage those community gatekeepers, because we call them community gatekeepers. So if we engage them, we involve the chiefs, the faith leaders, and the elderly in our discussions to make sure that they understand the challenges we are experiencing due to issues of culture. We present the challenges women are facing due to cultural barriers. They now start to understand and appreciate why is it important to learn as well as to learn other things so that we can achieve our main goal. The second one is we really need to start small and build gradually, because you can't just change something which people have been doing for over their history, they have been doing that. And you come and you say, let us stop this. So we can say, you know, rapid change can always threaten people. They always be afraid. Change is difficult. So begin with the small laws for women or youth, like in committees, promote mixed gender or youth adult advisory group, celebrate small wins publicly to normalize the inclusion. As long as we are making those small, and that progress, slowly we are penetrating. And we can also showcase local role models. You know, in those communities where we stay, we still have some women who have achieved. We can highlight those women and those young people who are already succeeding within the cultural context. So female farmers who are doing well in farming, youth leading community saving groups, women mediators supporting conflicts resolutions. And we can also use the evidence to demonstrate community benefits. Maybe another community, something has happened and it has changed. We take community leaders from such a community to come and talk to community leaders in this community, or vice versa, so that they can peer-to-peer learning. They can learn from one another. And lastly, another important thing, we need to maintain respect, and we should be patient in whatever we are doing, because the goal is not to erase the cultural identity, but just to evolve it. So let us avoid shaming or confrontational language, because cultural things are a bit sensitive. And let us celebrate the positive aspects of our traditions. And in that way, you see that everyone will be interested in this dialogue or in this discussion.
As we start to close out on our conversation today, I want to say thank you for our guest here, Chikonzero Undi from Care International in Malawi, to share some of his insight and some of the behind the fantastic work he's actually doing. And you know, I love to hear from people on the ground, not just read reports. You know, I want to hear from the people who are on the forefront of this. Right?
Yeah, reports can lie sometimes.
You know, but this is what we are trying to do when we're looking at African voices. We want a diverse range of voices. The continent is very, very diverse, and we want our guests are giving insight to our listeners. And what's the beautiful thing about this? We've had so much reviews of people saying they love the conversations. And you know, we're gonna just keep doing the best that we can and bringing on some amazing people like yourself. So I'm gonna have one more question before I want you to have a closing message, but one more question. You touched on 2063. So I want to know a bit more, right? So if Malawi and Africa really want to invest in women and young people, what would the continent look like in the next 10, 20 years?
That's good. Yeah.
We're hearing about all these government agendas.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
how do you see it?
Yes. Okay. So there are a number of things I can vision, I can see when I close my eyes and I start imagining in the next 10 to 20 years, if those things we have discussed have been put into use. I see an economically thriving continent powered by local innovations. You remember I talked about local innovations, youth who can innovate. So if we have really given the women or the young people that opportunity to innovate, I can see an economically thriving country as well as continent. You know, as I already said, women and youth currently make up a large share of Africa's population. And they are also the largest share of people who are participating in the agricultural workforce, informal traders, caregivers, micro enterprise entrepreneurs. So if we are giving them this opportunity, we'll see a surge in women-owned and youth-owned enterprises. We'll see an increase or a stronger or more resilient middle class where women and youth increase their earnings, local consumption growth, local market strengthened. And trust me, we'll see an Africa as a global center of innovation, whereby even countries like Europe and America can come here to learn from what we are doing if we are really serious and give young people as well as women the chance. Trust me, we'll have healthier and more educated and more confident communities because those people we are talking about are in the majority. So investment in women and youth is one of the most proven ways to improve well-being. We'll have reduced poverty, improved the child nutrition, and better health outcomes. We'll have a high school completion rate, not those low completion rate, but the completion rate will now be high. Youth will be leading in the health and the social campaigns. And most importantly, we'll have a more gender balanced leadership landscape, whereby we'll have more women in leadership position, more youth in leadership position, and you have where women will lead cooperatives, companies, as well as community structures. Youth will shape national and continental agendas. And because of that, we'll have a very vibrant rural economy, as well as climate resilient communities. So we really need to invest because in the next 10 or 20 years to come, we'll have a safer and more equitable society whereby issues of gender violence will be just a history. Oh, we had the gender-based violence. And we have the continental identity whereby people will now aspire to come and live in Africa, to come and work in Africa. That is only if we put women and youth at the forefront and fully empowered, not just letting them participate.
Your closing message, and I want you to talk directly to women, young girls, and young people.
Okay.
To be defined and inspire. What would you say to them? Talk straight to them now.
Yeah, I want to speak to that young people who is looking at me now. I'm talking to him or to her, and I'm talking to that woman out there. The first thing I'm saying is believe that your voice matters. That's the first thing. Believe that your voice matters. Your ideas, your vision, your questions, and even your doubts are a part of the journey. Do not shrink to fit in the expectation of the world around you. Speak with courage. Speak with courage. Speak with clarity. Speak because someone coming after you needs to know that it's possible. Everything is possible in this world. You just need to rise up. And the secondary, start where you are with what you have. You know what? In this life, greatness is rarely born in perfect conditions. It grows in the soil of the small beginning. There's persistence, and we really need to make bold choices. You know, you don't need permission to start creating change. Begin where you are, then things will start. And another thing, protect your integrity. You know, in this world, we are living in the world where there are a lot of shortcuts. Please don't take shortcuts. Your name, your word, your values, those are your true assets. So build a life and a legacy you are proud of, no shortcuts, because things usually follow you at the end. And lastly, know your identity. Know your identity is your strength. Your identity is your strength. So your culture, your language, your history, your roots, they are not obstacles. They are fuel. Stand true in who you are. You know, Africa's diversity, it's superpower, and so is yours. So be proud if you are Malawian like the way I am. Let me be proud of being Malawian. If we have challenges we are facing, I should be the solution to those challenges, not waiting someone to come. So know your identity, because that identity is your strength. You can do it, and you will do it. Sharp.
Thank you to you, Chikonzero Undi, from K International, right there in Malawi. And, you know, your closing words has been so, it was inspirational. And I think a lot of people need to hear what you're saying. And our show today is about empowerment. It's about giving the voice to the voiceless. And, you know, we say thank you to you for giving the insight in the work that you're doing. But, you know, it is about upliftment, because we hear too many reports about all the things are not happening, all the things are not working, but we want to hear about the things that are working. So I want to say thank you to you again. And also our audience, thank you for tuning in. Please like, please share, please comment, and share our recordings. African Voices for the Future is important. Education is on the rise. My name is Diana Powell, ICANN Academy Group. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm assuming by the time you get to this point in the show, you really have liked what you've heard. So please like, please share, please comment. Your support is much needed. So thank you again. Until next time. Bye.